Soul Contract Archetypes, map your divine blueprint today. Before you were born, before your name was spoken, before your first breath fractured silence into sound, something ancient and intentional may have already been written into the architecture of your existence. Not as fate carved in stone, but as a living agreement, flexible, intelligent, responsive, what mystics across cultures have whispered about for thousands of years and what modern psychology is only beginning to circle around using different language. A soul contract is not a punishment, not a rigid destiny, and not a spiritual prison. It is more like a blueprint encoded beneath memory, a preconscious design that influences why certain people appear in your life like mirrors you didn't ask for, why some challenges repeat until they are seen rather than solved, and why you feel inexplicably drawn towards certain paths even when logic resists. The idea that life is random begins to crack when you notice how specific your lessons feel, how personal your struggles are, how tailored your awakenings seem, as if the universe knows you by name even when you forget yourself. Across ancient civilizations, from early Vedic philosophy to Gnostic texts, from Egyptian mystery schools to early Christian mysticism, there is a recurring suggestion that consciousness enters matter with intention. Not intention in the human sense of planning every detail, but intention as alignment. Modern neuroscience has discovered something strange and quietly revolutionary. The brain does not merely react to reality, it predicts it. Before you consciously choose, your neural architecture is already preparing a response based on patterns formed long before awareness steps in. This mirrors an ancient spiritual claim, that the soul arrives already oriented towards certain experiences, not because it is forced to, but because growth requires friction, and evolution requires contrast. What if the pain you resist is not evidence of failure, but evidence of precision? What if your life is difficult in exactly the way it needs to be to awaken what only you can awaken? Soul contract archetypes are not labels to trap identity, they are lenses that clarify why your life unfolds the way it does. Archetypes are not personalities. They are energetic roles consciousness explores across time. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes as universal patterns within the collective unconscious, but ancient traditions went further, suggesting these patterns are not merely psychological but spiritual trajectories. When you understand your archetypal contract, you stop asking why life is unfair and start asking what this experience is training you to become. Some souls incarnate as stabilizers, born into chaos to anchor calm. Others arrive as disruptors, destined to break systems not because they enjoy destruction, but because stagnation suffocates evolution. Some carry healer codes, repeatedly wounded early in life so they can later recognize pain in others without needing it explained. Others arrive as witnesses, observers whose power lies not in fixing but in remembering and reflecting truth back to a world that has forgotten itself. Surprisingly, trauma research supports this pattern. Studies show that individuals who experience early emotional complexity often develop heightened empathy, intuition, and pattern recognition. This does not romanticize suffering, it reframes it. Pain is not sacred, but transformation is. The same event that fractures one person can forge another, not because one is stronger, but because each nervous system carries a different pre-existing orientation. If souls choose themes rather than events, then free will still exists, but within a field of meaningful tension. You are not here to endure everything, you are here to discern what is yours to integrate and what is yours to release. Some archetypes carry contracts of remembrance. These are the souls who feel older than their age, who experience nostalgia for places they've never been, who sense grief without origin and wisdom without formal source. These individuals often struggle with belonging, not because they are broken, but because their role is not to blend in, it is to translate between worlds, between the seen and unseen, between language and silence. They are often misunderstood early in life, mislabeled as sensitive, distracted, or too intense, yet later become guides, artists, teachers, or quiet stabilizers whose presence alone alters a room. Science now confirms that certain people emit coherent heart-brain rhythms that measurably influence the nervous systems around them. Ancient mystics would simply say these souls remember how to hold frequency. Other archetypes carry contracts of confrontation. These are the ones whose lives feel like a series of initiations, where peace is temporary and challenge is constant. They often ask why rest feels earned rather than natural. Their relationships tend to be catalytic, short, intense, transformative. These souls are not cursed, they are positioned at pressure points in the collective psyche. Wherever systems are rigid, wherever truth is avoided, wherever fear masquerades as order, these individuals appear like fire. Fire does not negotiate. It reveals. Interestingly, evolutionary biology shows that stress accelerates adaptation. Species evolve fastest under pressure. Consciousness may follow the same rule. Then there are the architects, souls whose contracts revolve around building, structuring, stabilizing. These individuals often feel burdened by responsibility early in life, forced into maturity before innocence has time to stretch. They are reliable, consistent, often uncelebrated, yet foundational. Without them, movements collapse. Without them, visions never materialize. Their challenge is not ambition but rigidity. Their growth comes not from doing more, but from learning when to release control and trust emergence. Modern systems theory reflects this beautifully. Too much order creates fragility, while adaptive systems balance structure with flexibility. What is rarely discussed is that soul contracts are not static. They respond to awareness. When you become conscious of a pattern, its grip loosens. When you integrate a lesson, it stops repeating. This is why spiritual awakening often feels disorienting at first. The old script begins to dissolve, but the new one hasn't fully formed. Neuroscience calls this neural pruning, mysticism calls it initiation. You may feel lost not because you've failed, but because you've outgrown a version of yourself that once fit perfectly. Growth rarely feels like clarity at first. It feels like unlearning. The most surprising truth is that many contracts involve other souls. Some agreements are relational, designed for mutual activation rather than longevity. This explains why certain people enter your life like storms and leave like echoes. They were never meant to stay, they were meant to awaken something. Attachment makes us cling to form, but contracts operate on function. Once the lesson is delivered, the form dissolves. Grief then becomes not a sign of loss, but evidence of completion. Physics echoes this through entanglement. Particles influence one another across distance until the interaction resolves. Consciousness may operate similarly, entangling until transformation is achieved. Mapping your divine blueprint does not mean predicting your future, it means recognizing your patterns without judgment. It means noticing where resistance is highest, because resistance often guards the doorway to purpose. It means asking not, "Why is this happening to me?" but, "What capacity is this shaping within me?" When you shift the question, the experience changes. Even suffering responds differently when it is witnessed with curiosity rather than fear. This is not spiritual bypassing, it is spiritual engagement. There is a quiet power that emerges when you stop trying to escape your archetype and start embodying it consciously. The healer who acknowledges their own wounds without identifying as broken becomes a lighthouse rather than a sponge. The disruptor who channels their fire with intention becomes a reformer rather than a destroyer. The witness who trusts their sensitivity becomes a seer rather than an outsider. Integration does not erase difficulty, but it gives difficulty direction. What if your intuition is not imagination but memory? What if your recurring dreams are not random but symbolic rehearsals? What if the feeling that your life is leading somewhere specific is not delusion but recognition? Ancient texts suggest the soul leaves markers, synchronicities, fascinations, irrational curiosities, breadcrumbs leading back to its contract. Modern psychology calls this intrinsic motivation. The names differ, the phenomenon remains. You were never meant to become someone else. You were meant to become more fully aligned with what you already are beneath conditioning, beneath fear, beneath borrowed identities. When you align with your soul's archetypal current, effort decreases even as impact increases. Life does not become easy, but it becomes coherent. The noise quiets. The struggle organizes. Meaning emerges not as a concept, but as a felt sense of rightness even in uncertainty. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: your contract is not a debt. It is an offering. Consciousness exploring itself through you. The universe learning what it feels like to be you in this precise moment of history. When you live unconsciously, the contract feels heavy. When you live consciously, it feels purposeful. Awareness does not remove the path, it illuminates it. If you are listening to this and feel something stirring, something between recognition and relief, that is not coincidence. That is resonance. And resonance is the language of alignment. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are remembering. And as this awareness settles, gently, quietly, without force, allow yourself to breathe into the idea that your life is not random, your struggles are not meaningless, and your presence here, now, listening to these words, is part of a much larger unfolding, one that only completes when you choose to step fully into the blueprint you were always carrying. And knowing the way does not mean knowing every step. It means trusting the direction even when the terrain shifts beneath you. Many people mistake certainty for alignment, but alignment is quieter than certainty. It does not shout. It nudges. It returns you to the same inner question again and again until you finally stop resisting it. This is why moments of stillness often feel uncomfortable at first. Silence removes distraction, and without distraction, the blueprint becomes audible. Not as words, but as sensations, impulses, recognitions. A tightening in the chest when you ignore your truth. A sudden calm when you choose what aligns even if it costs you comfort. These are not emotional accidents. They are navigational signals. One of the most overlooked aspects of soul contracts is timing. Not everything encoded within you is meant to activate at once. Just as the human brain develops in stages, so does consciousness. Some aspects of your blueprint remain dormant until the environment can support them. This explains why certain realizations only arrive after loss, why certain strengths only surface after collapse, why certain callings only become visible when the old identity can no longer sustain you. In nature, seeds do not sprout because they want to, they sprout because conditions are right. You are no different. What you call delay may actually be protection. What you call failure may be recalibration. There is also a reason why awakening often coincides with disillusionment. When the soul begins to remember, illusions lose their grip. Careers chosen for approval start to feel hollow. Relationships built on familiarity begin to feel restrictive. Belief systems inherited without examination start to crack. This can feel like loss, but it is actually refinement. You are not losing meaning, you are shedding borrowed meaning to make room for your own. Neuroscience calls this cognitive dissonance. Mysticism calls it the dark night. The experience is the same, the old map no longer works, but the new one has not yet fully formed. Many people fear this phase because it feels like instability, but it is one of the most creative states consciousness can enter. Systems theory shows that transformation occurs at the edge of chaos, not in perfect order. Too much structure kills adaptability. Too much chaos dissolves coherence. The soul contract often places individuals precisely at this edge, because that is where evolution happens. If your life feels like it's constantly balancing between breakdown and breakthrough, it may be because you are designed to live at that threshold, not as punishment, but as function. Another surprising dimension of soul contracts is that they are not always individual. Some are collective. Entire groups of people incarnate with complementary archetypes to influence specific eras. Historians observe that periods of rapid social change coincide with spikes in certain personality traits across populations, heightened sensitivity, increased creativity, resistance to hierarchy. From a spiritual lens, this looks like coordinated arrival. From a scientific lens, it looks like evolutionary pressure shaping temperament. The language differs, but the pattern remains: consciousness responds to context. This may explain why you feel out of place in certain systems yet deeply at home in moments of shared insight with strangers. You recognize frequency faster than form. You resonate before you rationalize. This is not naivete, it is pattern recognition operating beneath language. Studies on mirror neurons show that humans are wired to feel into one another before conscious thought intervenes. Ancient traditions would simply say the soul recognizes its own. Understanding your archetype does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means engaging with it differently. When you stop trying to be everything, you become precise. When you stop comparing paths, you conserve energy. Comparison dissolves purpose because it forces the soul into foreign blueprints. No two contracts are identical, even when archetypes overlap. You may share themes with others, but the expression is uniquely yours. This is why imitation feels exhausting while authenticity feels sustainable. There is also a profound freedom in realizing that not every challenge is yours to fix. Some souls are here to heal, others to expose, others to endure, others to build, others to remember. When you attempt to fulfill a role not encoded within you, burnout follows. When you honor your role, even difficulty carries momentum. Purpose does not eliminate effort, it eliminates waste. Perhaps the deepest shift occurs when you realize that forgiveness is often contractual. Many souls incarnate into lineages carrying unresolved patterns, not to suffer under them forever, but to interrupt them. Trauma does not only pass through genetics, it passes through behavior, silence, normalization. When one individual becomes conscious within a system, the entire system gains an exit point. This is why healing can feel lonely at first. You are not just healing for yourself. You are altering a trajectory. Epigenetics confirms this. Emotional processing can change gene expression across generations. Mystics have always said the same thing in simpler terms: one awakened soul can free many. As you listen, allow the idea that your sensitivity may be strength, your restlessness may be guidance, your dissatisfaction may be intelligence. You were not designed to be endlessly comfortable, you were designed to be awake. Comfort maintains. Awareness transforms. And transformation is rarely tidy. If you ever feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of this, return to the present moment. Soul contracts are fulfilled in ordinary choices, not dramatic gestures. How you speak when no one is watching. What you tolerate repeatedly. Where you say no to preserve truth. Where you say yes despite fear. These micro-decisions shape the macro trajectory. Destiny is not a single event, it is an accumulation of alignments. And if doubt arises, remember this: a blueprint is not a script. You are not here to perform perfectly. You are here to participate consciously. Even resistance teaches. Even forgetting creates contrast that makes remembering meaningful. There is nothing wasted in consciousness. Everything feeds back into awareness eventually. So as this narration continues to echo in your awareness, let it settle without urgency. You do not need to figure everything out tonight. Recognition is enough for now. Seeds planted in consciousness unfold on their own timetable. Trust that what is meant to activate will do so when you are ready to hold it. Stay present. Stay curious. Stay aligned. Your soul did not arrive unprepared. And it has not forgotten who you are. And remembering does not always arrive as revelation. More often, it arrives as subtraction. A quiet loss of interest in what once consumed you. A gentle but persistent discomfort with roles you once played effortlessly. An inner pause where reaction used to be automatic. These moments are subtle, easy to dismiss, yet they mark the soul reclaiming authorship. When the contract begins to surface, the nervous system adjusts before the mind can explain why. This is why awakening can feel physical: fatigue without cause, emotion without story, a need for solitude that feels non-negotiable. Biology is catching up to consciousness. What few people realize is that the soul contract does not demand perfection, it asks for sincerity. You are not required to embody your archetype flawlessly. You are only asked to stop betraying it. Betrayal happens quietly, through small denials that accumulate over time. Saying yes when the body says no. Staying silent when truth presses against the throat. Shrinking intuition to fit expectations. These are not moral failures, they are survival strategies learned early. But survival is not the same as alignment. At some point, what once protected you begins to suffocate you. That moment is not punishment. It is transition. There is a reason why so many people awaken after hitting what they call rock bottom. When identity collapses, essence has space to emerge. The structures that once held you together must loosen before something truer can form. This is not because suffering is required, but because certainty blocks curiosity. When the old answers stop working, the deeper questions finally surface. And the soul speaks most clearly in questions, not conclusions. You may notice that when you move closer to alignment, synchronicities increase. This is not magic in the fantastical sense, it is coherence. When internal intention aligns with external action, probability reorganizes. Physics describes this as resonance. Psychology calls it confirmation bias. Mysticism calls it guidance. Again, different languages circling the same phenomenon. The universe does not bend for you, you tune into pathways that were always available but previously invisible to you. Another truth rarely spoken is that clarity often comes after commitment, not before. Many wait to feel certain before choosing, but certainty is a byproduct of alignment, not a prerequisite. The soul contract does not hand you a map, it responds when you step forward. Motion clarifies direction. Stillness clarifies motive. Both are necessary, but paralysis comes from demanding guarantees in a system designed for discovery. Some archetypes experience this as repeated endings. Jobs end. Relationships end. Identities end. Not because you are incapable of sustaining things, but because you are not meant to attach to form. You are meant to carry essence forward into new expressions. Others experience the opposite, long endurance, stability, continuity, because their role is to anchor presence in a world addicted to novelty. Neither path is superior. Both are necessary. Diversity of contracts is what allows consciousness to explore itself fully. As awareness deepens, you may begin to sense when a lesson is complete. The emotional charge dissolves. The trigger loses its hook. The pattern no longer repeats. This is one of the quiet miracles of conscious living. You do not need to conquer every fear, you only need to integrate it. Integration feels like neutrality, not victory. When something no longer defines you, it stops controlling you. And then there is purpose, not as a job title or a mission statement, but as an orientation of being. Purpose is how you meet life, not what you do with it. Two people can perform the same action, and only one feels fulfilled, because fulfillment comes from alignment, not activity. When your actions express your archetype, energy replenishes instead of drains. This is one of the most reliable signs you are living in accordance with your blueprint. If you are wondering whether you are on track, consider this: are you more honest than you were before, even if life feels uncertain? Are you more present, even if you have fewer answers? Are you less willing to abandon yourself to maintain approval? These shifts matter more than external success. The soul measures progress differently than society does. And when doubt whispers that this is all imagination, remember that imagination itself is not trivial. It is the interface between potential and form. Every invention, every system, every transformation began as something unseen. Consciousness creates by envisioning first. Dismissing inner knowing because it cannot yet be proven is how many truths remain dormant for generations. So let this understanding settle gently, without urgency or pressure. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing anything essential. You are unfolding in a way that cannot be rushed without distortion. Trust the intelligence moving through you. Trust the pauses as much as the momentum. Trust that what feels confusing now may later reveal itself as necessary preparation. Stay with the process. Stay with the questions. Stay with yourself. The blueprint is not something you must find. It is something you remember by living honestly. And as long as you are willing to listen, to discomfort, to intuition, to the quiet pull toward what feels true, you are already fulfilling your soul's contract, one conscious breath at a time. And each conscious breath is an act of quiet defiance against a world that rushes past its own depth. When you slow down enough to feel yourself choosing instead of reacting, something subtle recalibrates. You stop living as if life is happening to you and begin sensing how life is moving through you. This shift is not dramatic on the surface, yet it changes everything beneath. The soul contract does not activate through force, it responds to presence. The more present you become, the less fragmented your experience feels. Even chaos begins to organize itself around awareness. There may come moments when you grieve the versions of yourself that can no longer exist. This grief is often misunderstood. It is not regret, it is respect. Respect for the selves that carried you as far as they could. Letting go of an old identity is not betrayal, it is completion. Just as cells in the body are replaced continuously without the organism dying, identities dissolve so essence can continue evolving. What remains constant is not who you were, but the consciousness that experienced being them. At deeper levels, the soul contract is less about doing and more about embodying. You fulfill it not by achieving something spectacular, but by allowing your inner state to align with truth. When your inner world stabilizes, your outer world reorganizes accordingly. This is not wishful thinking, it is observable in systems theory and psychology. Inner coherence produces outer coherence. The reverse is never sustainable. This is why chasing external validation without internal alignment always feels hollow. The blueprint was never external to begin with. You may notice that as you align, tolerance for superficiality decreases. Conversations that once entertained you now feel draining. Environments that once felt safe now feel constrictive. This is not arrogance, it is calibration. Your nervous system is adjusting to a different baseline. What once felt normal now feels noisy. This is often when people fear they are becoming isolated, but what is actually happening is refinement. You are learning to choose resonance over proximity. And resonance does not require agreement. It requires authenticity. When you are authentic, even disagreement becomes clean. There is less projection, less entanglement, less confusion. You stop needing others to validate your experience because you are no longer abandoning it yourself. This is one of the most liberating outcomes of honoring your soul contract, emotional independence without emotional withdrawal. Somewhere along this path, you may realize that meaning is not something you discover, it is something you generate through attention. Whatever you attend to grows significance. Whatever you ignore fades. The soul contract guides attention toward experiences that catalyze growth. When you resist those experiences, attention fragments. When you engage them consciously, attention integrates. Integration feels like wholeness, not happiness. Wholeness can include sorrow, uncertainty, even fear, but none of these dominate. If there is one quiet truth worth holding, it is this: you are not meant to be understood by everyone. Universal approval is incompatible with authentic expression. Archetypes exist precisely because consciousness requires diversity of function. The one who disrupts will unsettle. The one who heals will expose pain. The one who witnesses will reflect what others avoid seeing. Resistance from the world is not always a sign you are wrong, sometimes it is confirmation you are effective. And effectiveness, in the context of the soul, is measured by depth, not reach. Even if only one person is impacted by your presence, and that person is you, the contract is already active. Transformation is contagious. It moves quietly at first, then exponentially. You may never see the full ripple of your alignment, and that is intentional. The soul does not need credit to fulfill its purpose. As this awareness deepens, trust begins to replace urgency. You stop trying to outrun uncertainty and start walking with it. Uncertainty becomes spacious rather than threatening. In that space, intuition has room to speak. Not loudly. Not urgently. But consistently. And consistency is how truth reveals itself over time. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of a decision, unsure yet strangely calm, recognize that as intelligence at work. The absence of fear is not recklessness, it is alignment. Fear dissolves when you stop fighting the current and start moving with it. Remain gentle with yourself as this unfolds. Awakening is not linear. Some days you will feel clear and grounded. Other days you will feel lost and heavy. Neither state defines you. Both are weather passing through awareness. The sky does not argue with the clouds. It allows them to move. And in allowing, you remember. You remember that you were never separate from the intelligence guiding you. You remember that meaning is not imposed from outside but revealed from within. You remember that the blueprint was not hidden to punish you, but veiled so discovery could be earned through experience. Stay awake to your own life. It has always been speaking to you. And it always will. And listening to that voice does not require isolation from the world, it requires intimacy with your own experience. The soul contract does not pull you away from life, it pulls you deeper into it. Into conversations where you speak a little slower but more truthfully. Into choices where you hesitate not from fear, but from discernment. Into moments where you realize that peace is not the absence of movement, but the absence of inner conflict. When inner conflict dissolves, even difficult actions feel clean. There is effort, but no resistance. Motion without friction. At this stage, many people begin to notice a strange paradox: the more aligned they become, the less they need to prove anything. Ambition softens into devotion. Goals shift from accumulation to expression. You still act, you still build, you still contribute, but the energy behind your actions changes. You are no longer trying to become worthy. You are exploring what worthiness looks like when it is assumed rather than earned. This shift alone can feel revolutionary, because so much of human behavior is driven by the unconscious belief that love, safety, or belonging must be deserved. This is where the soul contract becomes quietly radical. It invites you to live as if your existence itself is meaningful, not because of what you produce, but because of how consciously you participate. In a culture obsessed with outcomes, this orientation feels counterintuitive. Yet research on well-being consistently shows that fulfillment correlates more strongly with meaning than with pleasure or success. Meaning arises when your inner values and outer actions align. Mystics have always known this. Science is simply catching up with different vocabulary. As alignment deepens, you may also notice that your tolerance for self-deception diminishes. Excuses that once felt reasonable now feel heavy. Stories you told yourself to stay comfortable begin to dissolve. This is not cruelty toward the self, it is respect. Respect for your own intelligence. Respect for the awareness that has grown strong enough to handle truth without collapsing. Truth does not harm when it arrives at the right time. It liberates. There is also a quiet humility that emerges. You realize that you are both significant and small, both essential and replaceable, both unique and part of a vast pattern. These are not contradictions. They are perspectives that coexist. When you hold both, ego relaxes. You stop needing to be special, and in that release, your uniqueness expresses itself naturally. A paradox again, the less you try to stand out, the more authentically you do. Somewhere in this process, the question, "What am I here to do?" subtly transforms into, "How am I here to be?" This is not resignation, it is refinement. Being precedes doing. When being is aligned, doing becomes an extension rather than a compensation. You no longer act to fill a void, you act to share fullness. This is the difference between effort that drains and effort that nourishes. And if fear still appears, as it inevitably will, notice how different it feels now. It no longer commands. It informs. Fear becomes data rather than dictator. You listen to it, adjust if needed, and move anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to act without letting fear define the narrative. This, too, is part of the contract, not to eliminate fear, but to contextualize it. As days pass, you may realize that the world has not dramatically changed, yet your relationship to it has. Problems still arise. Uncertainty still exists. Loss still happens. But you meet these experiences with a steadier center. You recover faster. You spiral less. You return to yourself more quickly. This is growth that cannot be measured externally, yet it is unmistakable internally. And perhaps one of the most profound shifts is this: you stop waiting for permission. Permission to rest. Permission to change. Permission to follow what feels true. You recognize that no external authority can grant what was never theirs to withhold. The soul contract does not require approval. It requires consent, your consent to participate consciously in your own unfolding. So if you are still listening, still present with these words, let that itself be evidence. Evidence that something in you recognizes this frequency. You did not arrive here by accident. Curiosity is rarely random. Attention is rarely misplaced. You are engaging with these ideas because some part of you is ready to live with a little more honesty, a little more courage, a little more depth. There is no final arrival point. No moment where the contract is stamped, complete, and life becomes effortless. Fulfillment is dynamic. It renews itself through continued awareness. What matters is not reaching an endpoint, but staying awake along the way. So continue. Continue noticing. Continue choosing presence over autopilot. Continue honoring what feels true even when it feels inconvenient. Continue trusting that clarity emerges through engagement, not avoidance. Your life is not asking you to be perfect. It is asking you to be real. And that, perhaps, is the most sacred contract of all. And being real, in a world that constantly invites performance, is one of the bravest choices a soul can make. When you stop editing yourself to be acceptable and start expressing yourself to be honest, something profound happens. Life begins to meet you where you are instead of where you pretend to be. The exhaustion of pretending slowly lifts. The quiet relief of alignment settles in. You realize that you no longer need to chase meaning because meaning has been quietly walking beside you all along, waiting for you to notice. At this point, the soul contract no longer feels like a mystery you are trying to solve. It feels like a relationship you are learning to listen to. Some days it speaks through clarity, other days through discomfort, but always with intelligence. You understand now that growth is not about becoming someone new, it is about removing what was never truly you. Each layer you shed brings you closer to a steadiness that does not depend on circumstances. A calm that remains even when life feels loud. A knowing that does not require explanation. And perhaps the most beautiful realization of all is this: you are allowed to enjoy the journey. Awakening does not have to be heavy. Awareness does not have to be painful. Learning who you are beneath conditioning can be gentle, even joyful. Wonder returns. Curiosity softens fear. You begin to approach life not as a test you must pass, but as a conversation you are invited into. A living dialogue between your inner truth and the world around you. If this message reached you at the right moment, let it rest with you. You do not need to remember every word. You only need to remember how it made you feel. Let that feeling guide you back whenever you forget. Let it remind you that you are not alone in your questions, that your depth is not a flaw, and that your journey, however winding, is meaningful. And if this resonated with you, if something inside you felt seen, understood, or gently awakened, take a moment now to support this space. Like this video so it can reach others who may be quietly searching for the same understanding. Share it with someone who you feel might need these words at this exact time. And subscribe to this channel, because here we explore not just ideas, but experiences that help you remember who you truly are, step by step, layer by layer. Every time you return, you strengthen this connection. Every video becomes part of a larger journey, one of reflection, growth, and deep inner clarity. This is a place where questions are welcome, where learning is gentle, and where your soul does not have to rush. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your presence. That alone is an act of awareness. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind to yourself, and remember, your life is not random, your path is not meaningless, and your soul has always